Welcome back. In a moment, American football is the most lucrative sport in the world. But how successful is it outside the United States? But first, here are some other stories to keep an eye on. Violence continues on the streets of Venezuela as supporters of the country's opposition stage a general strike to remove President Nicolas Maduro. It follows last week's suspension of a referendum to remove the president. The Zika virus could spread into India and Africa, according to the medical charity, the Wellcome Trust. The mosquito-borne virus causes brain damage in newborns. A court in Japan has awarded more than $13 million in damages to the families of 23 schoolchildren who died in the March 2011 tsunami. The court found that teachers responsible for the children had waited 45 minutes before evacuating the children to higher ground. The American Football League has been staging games in London this October, with the final game this weekend. The games have been selling out, which has raised the prospect once more of a US team based full-time in the UK. Back in the 1980s and 1990s, the capital even had its own team, the London Monarchs. But their popularity proved short-lived, and they ended up relocating due to a lack of public interest. So what's different this time around? Are we ready for the NFL touchdown? Insight's Sarah Firth reports.
American football does London. Now in its 10th year, NFL's International Series is looking stronger than ever, with its 3 games in London across October having sold out British stadiums. Over the years, the NFL's International Series has grown and developed, and the NFL's made no secret of the fact that it wants to widen the appeal of the league globally. So what is next for the sport internationally? There's certainly a large fan base here. If you haven't heard of the NFL, well, where have you been? The National Football League consists of 32 teams.
I'm a Texans fan, actually.
Broncos, baby. Seahawks! Colts, obviously.
And the teams have, over the years, built up a solid British fan base.
Just the excitement and the quick plays, and it's just not, compared to English football, it's not slow, it's just fast and more exciting.
There's now talk of a permanent NFL team based in London. So with some of the teams in town, we went backstage to find out more.
It's fun, it's always a good experience coming out here, seeing the fan base that we have. All the fans come out to the fan rally, and we always know that every Sunday we play here, it's pretty electric.
How is it to be here in London today?
That's great, it's an awesome environment. I was just talking about 10 years ago, I never pictured myself playing NFL football in London.
And what's the biggest difference between the American fans and the British fans?
They cheer non-stop as far as the British fans. American, there'll be times where if you're not playing well, they're not going to be cheering you on. But as far as here, once the game starts, the game ends, you're going to feel that energy.
Talk of a permanent team in London is not without its issues. It's not yet clear whether one of the American teams might relocate across the pond, or if a new team would be established in London. But British fans have already chosen American teams to support, and it could be hard to build support for a new team from scratch.
Well, that's part of what we're still going through as we grow. We're learning from every experience when we come over. We have to be assured that we can do it from a competitive standpoint. That's the key for us. Can we make sure that the team that plays here, the teams that come over, can do it and be competitive? And we don't want to make sure that we're not putting them at any kind of disadvantage.
So how do American fans feel about potentially losing one of their teams to Europe?
I think they'll question, why are we doing it? Why should we take American team overseas? But I think it's good relations to do that.
As well as being a fun family day out, the NFL is also big business.
I think it's no question that we're going to have a permanent presence in London this century. I think by 2025 or sooner.
That's your prediction.
I really do.
Yeah. Well, there you have it from the horse's mouth, or the owner of the Colts at least. NFL fever internationally looks set to stay and keep putting a smile on the faces of fans. Sarah Firth reporting for Insight.
Well, to discuss that, I'm joined by Jay Stewart. He's the editor-at-large at iSports Connect, the world's biggest sports business community platform. Jay, this is a phenomenal game back in the States. It raises massive amounts of money. Why do they have to go abroad?
I think that it's necessary to keep pushing, and I think that all sports are in the same boat. They want to keep growing internationally. The world is getting smaller. It's also opening up all kinds of opportunities with that digital opportunity to grow. I don't think that you can rest on your laurels. And I think that as successful as the NFL is at home, I think they do feel that in order to be really successful, they need to be global. And of course, their partners, their sponsors, want access to a global market.
So it's the business case that drives this, doesn't it? I'm just trying to think, although you can sell out a stadium like Wembley, which is huge in UK terms, I know that raises a lot of money, but you've got all the logistical. You've got to get these teams over here, you've got to support them, put them up in hotels. Do you think it turns a buck?
I think this is an investment, bringing the teams over for these games. I don't know the actual details of the financial return. It's a massive project to bring these teams over, to get the stadium set up, to rent the stadium, to have the broadcast in position for their partners so that it's at the same level as an American broadcast. Huge, huge undertaking. And I think the thing about the NFL is they need to be sure that everything they do is first class, first rate, up to the standard that they're used to delivering at home. And back in the States, their product is unmatched in terms of quality. So that's one of the things that makes it especially difficult.
I was going to ask you about that television audience, because the game is sort of interdependent with television coverage, isn't it, these days? If you take the game around the world, you get all the time lag and time differences problems. If you're playing a game to get a crowd there on a Friday night in London, suddenly the Americans are having to watch that halfway through Friday afternoon. That doesn't work, does it?
I'm sure they could find ways here in Europe to fit the schedule into the American viewing habits. I was with the NFL China fellows just this week, and they were saying difficulty in China is that the games are on, the Sunday games are on in the morning in China, early morning. So, you know,
they're not used to playing at that time of day.
It is a challenge, but this is a challenge for all sports. You know, all sports face the challenge of their timetables and their calendars in terms of the competition with other sports and in terms of the competition for viewers. So this is something they're all working through.
And it's not an easy ride, I guess, from the coach's point of view, and particularly the player's health, which is sort of micromanaged these days with diets and stuff. Suddenly you've got to factor in an international flight. You're maybe in a country just for 24 hours and then you're back out again. That impacts on the game at home, doesn't it?
I think these players are very used to traveling. They're very used to the mentality of going from one place to another. I don't know whether the transatlantic flight makes that much difference because they're used to flying from east to west. Their ability to perform at a very high level with all the traveling they do is amazing. And one of the things that the teams work on very hard is to be sure that they minimize the impact of that. I think that the player issue is something, though, that is very much built into anything the NFL does and anything that any of the big American leagues do, because the power of the players is huge. So anything that they do has to have the consent of the players. In terms of the bigger picture, I'm sure the players are on board with having the idea of a European team, but this would be something that they would be working through, because they would have to relocate if they bring players over.
I was going to ask you about the idea of an extra team, because on the face of it, the superstars are the US-based teams. And it's great. You bring them to another country, there's enough fans to go and see them. Does that work if each country in Europe or elsewhere in the world starts producing their own teams?
Well, this is the bigger picture issue. When the NFL invested in a league over here, I think that their view was, one, that they wanted to grow the audience and that they were going to have something that made a return and would work. But I think they also wanted to develop a following here and players here, so that eventually that league that they put here in Europe would rise in quality and they would have something that would be comparable. I think they realized after a few years that that was too big an ask. They also realized that
in order to be successful in Europe, they would have to give the audience here a first-rate product. It couldn't be a minor league product.
Yeah.
And I think the reason that they pulled the plug on the league before in the London Monarchs you mentioned was not so much about the appetite for American football. It was that they realized that if people were going to see American football and would want to watch it, they would want to see the real thing.
Yeah. Jay, good to talk to you. Jay Stewart, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
Now we end with our Insight Bite. This is a little something that we feel you should know. Today, a group of Japanese researchers have made landfall on a new island. Nishinoshima, which was once just a rocky outcrop in the Pacific Ocean, has grown to become a landmass of 662 acres. How has it grown so much? Well, for the past 3 years, ash and rock has been continuously spewing from a nearby volcano, turning it into a fully fledged island. That's all for now. I'm Martin Stanford. That was Insight.